right. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's great to be here.
For people who don't know who we're speaking to, we're talking to Anthony Scott, who's a chief film critic at the New York Times and distinguished professor of film criticism at Wesleyan. He's also joining us today to talk about his latest book, which is Better Living Through Criticism: How to Think About Art, Pleasure, Beauty, and Truth. So this is a pretty intellectual book.
Nice of you to say. I think that's a compliment.
It is a compliment, okay. The highest. But, you know, I'm sure it's, I mean, your book is a defense about thinking, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the same people who, well, actually, let's start. I'm going to put you on the spot and have you give, I guess, the pitch you would give to people who haven't read your book at a cocktail party or something. Like, what's your book about?
It's really about how criticism is something that we all do. It's not a defense of professional criticism of why my job is so important and so special. It's really about how we experience and appreciate and judge and talk about works of art, and why that's important, why that matters, and why it's something that we should think about and pay attention to and try to get better at. That will enhance our ability to appreciate those works of art and imagination. We'll understand the world around us better. We'll live better if we learn how to think more clearly and more critically about what's around us.
Right. You want to tell our viewers, I guess, what kind of launched or what led to writing the book?
Well, there
with Samuel Jackson.
With Samuel Jackson, yes. Well, I've been thinking for a while, because if you work for any period of time as a critic or reviewer, you get lots of mail and lots of feedback, and a lot of it is fairly hostile. A lot of it is sort of along the lines of, what gives you the right? Who do you think you are? I thought that movie was great. Why do you have to ruin it for everybody? So I got used to that, and I'm thinking for a while, well, it'd be interesting to kind of to write about this or to talk about this, to clear up some misconceptions about who critics are, what critics do, because there's this perception that we just go around hating everything, and, and that we're failed, bitter artists, and we just want to ruin everybody else's good time. So around the time I was starting to think about this book, this obscure little art film called The Avengers came out.
Very obscure.
And, and since I wrote a review of it, and it wasn't even that negative a review. This is the interesting thing. I said, you know, there was stuff that I liked about it, some of the performances, some of the story, but I was kind of a little impatient with the more conventional blockbuster aspect of it. And I thought that, you know, it could have been a much better movie if it didn't have to fit into this box of being a superhero action movie. So I wrote my review, and as usually happens, I you know, was in the paper, and I moved on to the next thing. And then the morning that the review was published, which was before the movie had really even opened, I went on Twitter, and there were just like 1,000 angry tweets. And I thought, from people like with you know, Hulk avatars, and they were all saying very terrible, unkind things about me. I thought, what is going on? You know, because you get a little bit of that, but this really felt like it was a whole wave.
Right.
And they kept referring to Samuel L. Jackson. They were like, "You're right, Samuel L. Jackson. A.O. Scott is a jerk." And I thought, what is happening? And I found out that he had tweeted, not at my handle, but just about me, "Avengers fans, we have to find A.O. Scott a new job, one he can actually do." I thought that was pretty funny, because I don't think there is any job that I could actually do at this point. But I thought, well, you know, that is something I'm actually interested in taking seriously. What is this job? How do you actually do it? And we had a little back and forth on Twitter, and it kind of got picked up on various media and entertainment websites, and they like photoshopped the two of us fighting with lightsabers, and
love it.
And it was pretty cool. It was like, wow, Samuel Jackson knows I exist, which is kind of an interesting thing. And then about 6 months later, he gave an interview. I think it was to the Huffington Post, now HuffPost, in which he kind of came back to the interviewer asked him, you went after A.O. Scott after his review, and he launched into this quite eloquent and also somewhat profane, in the Samuel L. Jackson style, tirade about me and how I was over intellectualizing this movie, and I should just like leave it alone, and if I didn't get it, I should just say I didn't get it. And that really kind of got me thinking even more, because it seemed like he was articulating what are some of the very basic ideas about criticism and what's wrong with criticism and what's wrong with critics. And I thought, well, if I could figure out a way to sort of to seize this opportunity to explain it as I understand it, then that would be an interesting thing to do. So I was already working on the book, and as you say, it is it gets kind of dense and highbrow and philosophical in places. So it's good, to have some pop culture in there too. I mean, there's some to have a fight with a movie star to lead off the whole.
No, that was a great lead off. And in fact, I'm actually in our print author interview, which will be coming out hopefully next week. One of the things that I talked about was, my teenagers, when they were kids, watching Ratatouille, and that Anton ego, which that's the version of the critic. And if you look up critic in the dictionary, it's someone who will find fault. And I think people, so people will, say, well, you that's all you do, find fault in something. But one of the things I brought up, and that comes up in their interview, is like, all right, if we have things like Consumer Reports to test your fridge, to test your appliances, I guess with art, it's far more subjective. And actually, I think one of our readers has a question: how do you discern between some, this art, and art is so subjective, and how do you know what highbrow, lowbrow?
Well, I think it's important to get away from those categories, because you don't want to prejudge it, and I think that there are critics who think about what they do as sort of applying standards, as if as if you were testing a car. And you could have a checklist on like what makes this car worth buying, the fuel economy and the design and whatever. But a movie's not quite like that. There aren't necessarily objective standards that you can apply or appeal to. But what you can do is you can talk about your own experience. You can use your own experience and your own understanding of what you saw as a basis to try to explain it to someone else, and to try to persuade them to maybe see it the way that you did. So it's not that it's objective, it's certainly subjective, but it has to be more than just my opinion. Like if I say to you, I love this movie, that's not very useful to you. That's not going to help you. That's not going to help you decide whether you'll like this movie or what this movie is about or why it's important. So the burden is on me, if I have your attention, to say, well, this is what I thought, and this is why I think this is something worthwhile, or this is something terrible, this is something bad. So what you're hoping for, and why criticism is a little different from numerical ratings and aggregated scores, is that it's a matter of a voice and a sensibility that you trust. Another person who's out there in the world, who is seeing movies or reading books or listening to music or whatever it is, whose judgment you think is interesting, not necessarily that you always agree with, but who you think has something worth hearing about these things that you're also interested in.
You kind of just answered one of the other questions somebody's asking, which is, doesn't a critic just need to have integrity with their own standards of judgment, so you could learn what critics, you resonate with? And I know you've been asked before, like, who do you like, and your colleagues.
Well, I mean, there are a lot of them who I read all the time, past and present. I think that the key word there is integrity. It's very important that a critic is honest and not and independent. That's very important, because there's a lot of information that comes out at us that is in various ways bought and paid for. It's advertising, or it's marketing,
Right.
or it's celebrity profiles. Like you can turn on any late night talk show and you'll see the movie stars coming on saying like, this movie's great, and the host will say, yeah, this movie's great, and they'll show you a clip and it all looks great. And those people are doing their job.
Right.
My job is to say, you know what, maybe not, or maybe, but no one's paying me to say one way or the other. And I think that the integrity and honesty and trustworthiness of critics is it's in a way all we have. It's the thing that that we have that people can rely on and
And you know, along that same path, I know you've been asked before, you know, how do you temper a review if you have a bias for or against subject matter? And you've said that you have a higher tolerance for slow, sad movies and very low boredom threshold when it comes to loud, violent. And it's the same, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But you also say one of the greatest pleasures of your job is learning to appreciate types of movies you have previously ignored. And that's why, you know, so many of us enjoy it, because not everything that is out there falls under that genre that we like.
Right.
So can you give us an example of a movie that recently surprised you, that was one of those categories that you were going to have to be more thoughtful about?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you were.
Yeah, there's an independent movie that's out in theaters now called Colossal. It has Jason Sudeikis in it and Anne Hathaway. And I didn't really know anything about it coming in, except that I heard that it was sort of a monster movie, and I thought, you know, we've seen a lot of that, and monster movies have never been my favorite genre. I mean, one of the funny things about being a critic that you learn, you know, right when you start the job is most people go to movies that they want to see, right?
Right.
And when you're working as a critic, you know, whether you want to see it or not, it's your job to see it. So I've learned to appreciate science fiction and horror and certain kinds of action movies that I hadn't really been into before, that I would sometimes go and see, but weren't like, I felt like my favorite genre. So this movie Colossal, I thought it's a monster movie, and then it starts out as what seems like a very kind of conventional, annoying sort of indie comedy. Like, it's about Anne Hathaway plays this woman. She's broken up with her boyfriend. She has a bit of a drinking problem. Her life is going badly in her early adulthood, and she goes back to her hometown. And she meets up with an old childhood friend who you think, you know, they're going to get together finally at last. He's played by Jason Sudeikis, and then everything that you think is going to happen doesn't happen, and it keeps you guessing, and it turns into this really interesting, improbable hybrid of comedy and a satire and a horror movie that's really scary, and this crazy surreal monster movie, because for reasons that I can't really explain and wouldn't want to spoil,
Right.
These two people's interactions in this little suburban town where they both grew up in are connected to these monsters, this giant kind of Godzilla monster and this big angry robot who are fighting and stomping all over Seoul, South Korea. And once you figure out the connection, once the characters figure out the connection, it gets weirder and more interesting. And so this was an example of a movie that I came in a little bit skeptical about. You know, I would come in with an open mind. I don't ever hate anything in advance, but I was just like, okay. And by the time it was over, I was like, wow, that was really pretty interesting. That was cool. So,
cool. So we have a question along the same.
Yeah.
How can a viewer open their mind to a new viewing experience? You know, I mean, it's your job, and you're good at what you do, and but for the folks that don't necessarily, you know.
Well, I think it's good. It's good to take a chance. You know, I think that the you know, there's a risk that you might be bored, or you might be offended, or you might be confused. But there's also the chance that you might see something new. And I think that one of the things that I argue for very, very passionately in the book is this idea of trying to get outside our own taste, trying to kind of not live by the algorithm or the Netflix queue suggestions that say, well, you like this, so you'll also like this. Not to be kind of boxed in by the expectations of our own taste, and also in a way not to be afraid, and to sometimes something will be a little puzzling. It'll take a little bit of work, but sometimes that work can really pay off. And I do always hope that audiences will take a chance. That people who think they're only interested in kind of mainstream Hollywood movies will take a chance and see a smaller film, a documentary, an art film, a foreign language film. And also, it works the other way too, because there are a lot of really interesting blockbusters or other kinds of commercial movies that people who have sort of a more sophisticated idea of their own taste won't take a chance on. And I sometimes feel like my job is to advocate in both directions, to sort of to get it in everyone's face and say, wait a minute, you might think that, is just another action movie, but it's really interesting. Or you might think this is a weird, boring, strange foreign movie, but give it a chance.
Well, I feel that for all the smack talking about critics, we still care very much about what critics think. Why do you think people care so much? I mean, obviously, even Samuel Jackson did, or he wouldn't have tweeted. We care.
I think there are a few reasons. I mean, I think partly because critics have a platform, that our voices are kind of are heard sometimes above the general conversation, and we're perceived for that reason to have a certain kind of power or influence. So that means that people who are involved in making movies or artists of any kind do care, because they feel like we can affect their success or their fortunes. That if we give a good review to something, it will help bring an audience in. If we give a bad review, it'll hurt its chances. But I think that the other reason that people care, including people who get frustrated or angry at us, is exactly what I was saying before. Is that critics are independent. We're not part of any of the machinery that's producing. We're not part of the publishing industry. We're not part of Hollywood. We're not part of the music business. We're just people, who have great interest in these art forms, but who are kind of off to one side, who are speaking in a way directly to the audience. And I think that there are members of that audience who find that their experience of movies or music or art or whatever it is are enhanced by reading critics. I mean, that's partly how I got into it. Yeah, go ahead.
Given that you have this divide, we have a reader that says, there is a huge problem in society right now. We're polarized politically. And so she asked, do you encourage people in your reviews to try to take a chance? I mean, we've read many, are there sometimes that you feel, yourself pushing like, hey, if you thought this, like maybe for politically, you thought this one was going to go this way, it was a bit more open-minded or less open-minded?
Yeah, I mean, I try. Obviously, everyone has their own political beliefs, their own values, and it's not like critics can really suppress that. But also, I try not to make that I mean, I assume that people who are reading might believe other things and might have other values, and I still want to be able to talk to them. I mean, I think that one of the things about culture and about popular culture is that it crosses some of those divides. That there are people who are on the left and on the right who love Star Wars movies or are watching some of the same television shows or even reading some of the same books and listening to some of the same music. And I think that it's not necessarily that those things can bring us together. I mean, I think it's sort of naive to believe that they can sort of, that music or movies or TV can kind of heal those divides, which are very serious and very deep. But they are at least some kind of experience that we can have in common, something that we can share, something that we can talk about. And I think, there's great reason to be pessimistic about American politics, but I've never been pessimistic about American popular culture. I mean, I think that movies are amazing. I think that popular music, you know, whether it's hip hop or country and western, or rock and roll or alternative or gospel. I mean, if you just look at the range of things that are out there being made by people, the creativity of storytelling and expression that exists, that's where I sort of put my faith more and more. Maybe less and less in the institutions of politics and government.
Right. You know, I think that, did you ever think of, I enjoyed the book very much, and a lot of us did, but I also wondered, um, I would have loved to have seen like a breakdown of a kind of checklist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you have some kind of methodology for going down. Like, so for
Yeah.
example, I'm sure that, you know, some that have insight about life, or, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
are better than the just cars exploding. And people are
Yeah.
going to kill me for this. I could hear that already, but you know, I would
Well,
have loved to have seen kind of like the thought process, like with a movie. And I think
mhm.
you did that with you know, the Avengers, where you said I enjoyed so much of it, and you spoke
Mhm.
very highly of it. But then there was, you know, you find so much of criticism is how you make a piece of artwork better, and you
Right.
say that. Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think it's true that I mean, and I think about uh, this a lot. Like, what would be my, you know, my principles or my values or my standards? Because it's not, you know, um, it's not as if it's just sort of ad hoc that every movie you're just sort of judging in a vacuum. And I would say, I mean, there are a few different things that I look for, or I respond to, and one of them, I think you just sort of were getting at, which is some kind of human reality, some connection to life, which doesn't mean that they have to be realistic. You know,
Right.
there are movies that are completely fantastical, that are science fiction or animated movies that nonetheless have a core of
Right.
authentic human feeling or insight that tell me something about how people live, about
Right.
what it is to be
Or to help
human.
to think critically about that
Yeah,
experience. Yeah.
and that brings me. I mean, I think, you know, Roger Ebert always said, who's kind of one of my role models, and was a I was lucky enough to be friends with him near the end of his life. He always used to say that the thing about movies that make them such a special and powerful art form is their ability to generate empathy. That is, you're looking at people on the screen, who are not real, who you don't know, who may be nothing like you. Who oftentimes, you know, have never existed, and yet from moment to moment as you're watching, you care about what happens to them. You
Right.
feel what they feel. You want to know. You're invested in the story about them that you're watching, and that's a remarkably powerful thing. And I think when it's done well, it gives movies this sort of that's what, when people talk about the magic of movies, I think that's kind of what it is. And so I get frustrated when movies abuse that, or don't care about it, or get too obsessed with their own kind of technique or their own cleverness. I want, even in a movie that's you know, an action movie or a dumb comedy, even in like, um, let's say the seventh Fast and Furious movie. You know, that's an action movie about car chases and all these crazy action sequences. There's some really beautiful thing that's sort of built on this framework of, you know, friendship and loyalty and family. That's very beautiful. You know, that's part of the secret of why those movies have appealed in the strong way they have generated the
Yeah.
fans around the world that they have.
So
And
in
that's
that
something that
kind
you
of,
have to think about,
yeah,
seriously.
in that kind of hypothetical checklist that we would
Mhm.
love to see, right? This demystifying how a critic goes. You talked about the magic of movie making.
Mhm.
I, there were two questions that I was thinking of. One is, how do you experience these movies? I'm sure a lot of them get sent to you. Do you watch them from the comfort of your own home, or do you still get to go and relive it the way the rest of us do, you
No,
know?
I watch them in the discomfort of a of a theater or a screening room. No, I almost never write a review that's only based on like a screener that I watch at home. Sometimes if I've seen a movie before at a festival or it had an early screening and I want to watch it again
Right.
to as I review it, I'll get a screener. But um, I much prefer, and luckily the distributors also prefer for me to see it, projected in a room. Sometimes it's a screening room with other critics and journalists, and other times it'll be at a theater, kind of at a sneak preview situation where there'll be like designated rows for critics. So I generally see it with other people in a darkened screening room on a projected onto a screen.
One of our readers
Which is
wants to know,
better.
where do you prefer to sit in the theater?
um, I am not someone who's I'm more interested in my physical comfort than in the sight line, but I generally prefer, so I like to be on the aisle and sort of I guess you would say screen left when I can.
So that's good to know, because I know that I was reading an interview where they had asked you, about some of your favorite movies coming up, and you were talking about what is it? Oh my gosh, the Love Bug, the buggy, the Disney stuff from back in the day,
Herbie the Love Bug.
Herbie and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And but you said so much of it had to do with being young and the magic
yeah.
of the movies. And then it got me to think, movies being as expensive as they are, and you're so busy. So when you watch it, it's a real treat. And there are some movies that I go see in the theater that there's part of that experience because
Mhm.
you're kind of isolated and focused just on that, whereas you wouldn't watch it on Netflix or
Right.
any. So that's good to know, because I thought, oh my gosh, if his experience is outside of that, it must take some of the magic out, and some of these people that like to throw shade at critics might be
Right.
saying he's jaded and he just watches this stuff.
No, I mean most critics I know are very particular about how they see them, and almost unanimously um, believe in the theatrical experience and in kind of the supremacy of the theatrical experience. I mean, what's interesting to me actually is sort of the opposite, is that more and more people don't see movies in theaters, and
That's true.
movies kind of
True.
come at us through all of these different routes and on these different platforms. And sometimes you have to think, well, this movie that I saw on the big screen or the relatively big screen in a theater is something that most people are going to see, on their laptop or on their tablet or in their living room. And I think that in a way is a divide, maybe in the experience that critics
Yeah.
and that the public has. And I think we're at a very interesting time now with movies,
Yeah.
because more and more people are seeing them that way, and more movies are available on these
Different formats.
platforms that make them available to more people. That you don't have to worry about, like, oh, is this movie going to come to the little theater in my town? Maybe my
Right.
town doesn't even have the kind of theater that would show these type of smaller movies. But I think the experience is different, and just um, one thing that every critic kind of faces now, and I write about this a lot in the book, is just how much stuff there is out there
Right.
competing for people's attention. There's a million hours of television produced every
Right.
year, and there are 1,000 feature films coming out into theaters, and then there's other stuff too, and there's just people's lives.
Well, speaking with all that stuff that's competing, we have a viewer that says, how much does he care about cinematography? I find I hate it when it distracts from the movie and love it when it enhances a story.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that there are very beautiful movies, and
Mhm.
I like beauty. I mean, I don't like it when the filmmakers seem not to care very much about how the movie looks, because
Mhm.
I think it's important. But I think there are examples where things will just sort of be shot in a certain way just to look cool or to
Right.
evoke a sort of a
Gratuitous. Yeah.
feeling or an atmosphere that they haven't really earned. But I think on the other hand, there are movies where thinking about my favorite movie from last year, the Best Picture winner, Moonlight, where the way that that was shot, the way that just the sort of the colors and the light were used to create a sense of the character's emotions and of a sort of meaning and feeling that wasn't conveyed in the dialogue or in the drama, was for me a great example of how that could only have been a movie. I mean, that was something that was a story that needed to be told in that cinematic language.
Actually, I love the way you put that. An atmosphere that was not earned. That's your next book. And well, speaking of atmosphere and cinematography,
Yeah.
um, I want to ask you a question that they asked Philip French, and
Hmm.
for our viewers, when did he die? 2015. He worked for
Yeah.
The Observer, and they asked him, "Will any current actors have the impact of people like Marlon Brando or Robert De Niro?" Like, so for you, are there actors kind of like worthy of that script atmosphere, or sometimes who the script or isn't worthy of them, but
Right.
who do you think today they feel that just
Yeah.
they bring it?
I mean, I think there are some tremendous actors. I think there's no shortage of acting talent, and I think one of the great things about the kind of the artistic explosion of television is it gives more opportunities to actually. I mean, I just finished watching Big Little Lies on HBO, which I liked pretty well as a story and a drama, but like Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon and Shailene Woodley and Laura Dern were all just
Yeah.
tremendous in that, and they're so good. And I think that when when actors like that have material that they can work with, they can do great things. I think Nicole Kidman is just an amazing actress who is having a kind of a moment now where she's able to prove that all over again. I think Daniel Day-Lewis is somebody who's has yet to discover the limit of his talent. Certainly, Denzel Washington. I mean, if you've seen Fences, like that is just a kind of a master class in stage acting and in screen acting and just how to like be a presence uh, on the screen. I think Viola Davis has that too
She does.
in
Yeah.
that same movie. So I think and I think there are a lot of interesting newer discoveries as well. I mean, we were talking about Moonlight before. Mahershala Ali, now Oscar winner Mahershala Ali
Right.
is someone else. It's just like, well, I want to I want to see whatever this guy can do, whichever direction he goes. So I think I think that um, styles of screen acting are changing a little bit. We're sort of um, at an interesting moment in that way. So I feel like the acting,
Mhm.
and a lot of times I will see a movie and feel like the acting is the strongest part of it, and I'll often
Yeah.
wish that the writing or the directing or the thought could rise to the level of some of these performers.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know, hopefully, I don't know if I asked this, but in the book, what do you think was the most misunderstood or least understood part of your book?
Um,
Or misunderstood? Because, again, it's like a, you know,
yeah, I guess what I would say is, and this was very interesting to watch because the book was very intentionally not written for an audience of professional critics. It was very much to, you know, a book for people who are interested in criticism and who
right.
are interested in art and interested in thinking about some of the ideas that I bring into the book. But of course, it was only reviewed by professional critics. So one thing that happened was, as I kind of expected, was that people brought their own agendas to it and had a version in their heads of how they thought the book should be written or how they would have written.
Right.
So there were people who were frustrated that I wasn't articulating a clear set of standards of excellence that I was going to defend. That it was too you know, too non-committal, too subjective, and not in a way strongly enough argued in favor of why criticism mattered. I think that the misunderstanding there was that the idea I have of criticism is very much grounded in not a canon of works, but an array of experiences. That is my understanding of art is fundamentally that it's not a museum full of masterpieces, but that it is a kind of a broad array of available experiences. And it's not my job as a critic
Right.
to sort of pick and choose who gets in and who doesn't
Right.
get in, but
Well,
rather to kind of wander among these things and try to explain them and try to explain my own reaction to them.
yeah. I mean, I think you say that in the beginning of your book when you say that the criticism is a job. It's like journalism or scholarship, um, and it's, you know, you remind people that critics bring their own, you know, expertise, their own unique area of
Mm-hmm.
expertise. So for me, to me it was unfair that people think it's open season. You know, it's like, well, of all the people that give their opinions, you know, somebody comes to give you an opinion on what is not working, you know, whether with it's your
Mm-hmm.
health or, and I know art can, you know, is different,
Right.
what constitutes art, but gosh, it's just part of it is feel like leave me alone. It's so unfair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have to be able to take it if I'm going to dish it out. I mean,
Yeah.
it was fascinating to me to be, you know, to like to read reviews and to understand a little bit what it's like to be on the receiving end
Right.
of and I made sure, you know, I read all of them that I could find out about, and it's what I mean. What I found is it's not a great surprise that, you know, when you tend to think you've been understood when you've been praised. You know, when someone says that it was great, you think, oh yeah, they really got it.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who didn't like it so much, you think misunderstood it. But
Right.
I found that I didn't mind the strongly negative reviews as much as the lukewarm ones. I mean, it
Right.
really, because if someone got mad enough to attack the book, if it just pissed them off, and
Right.
it got to them somehow, then, you know, that meant that it had an impact. But the reviews that were like, well, yeah, this was interesting, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
I agreed with this, I didn't agree with
I
that.
think that means
That's
they
when
didn't read it.
you know, I just um,
Yeah.
that's all you could muster. I've worked on this thing for, you know, years of my life, and you just kind of like, yeah,
Right.
whatever.
We have a reader that asks, does making a living as a critic affect your ability to simply enjoy a movie?
It's a good question. It's a question that I often get, and I think um, the thing that affects it is the the deadline and the imperative to write. That is, I've always, even before I was a professional critic, I think I watch things critically. So I don't think that there's a change in how I experience movies, you know, because I always liked thinking about them. I was like arguing about them. I was like talking about them. Um, but and that's true, you know, whether I'm just going on the weekend for fun with my family or friends, or if I'm going for work. But the difference is, like, if I have to get up in the morning and put together, you know, 800 coherent words about something. When I don't have to do that, there's a great feeling of joy and liberation.
Right. And I have a question. Did you always want to be a film critic, or along the lines, another question is, how do we even go about becoming a film critic, or when did you know, or how do you get into this? Or
Well, it's an interesting story. I'll tell the shortest possible version of it, which is that I became a film critic entirely by accident. It was not my idea at all. It was someone else's very strange thought that I would be one. I'd always been interested in criticism, and I had always been interested in movies. I mean, I was a very passionate moviegoer from the time I was an adolescent, and also a reader of criticism, of movie criticism, and also music criticism. I think the critics who I really kind of first discovered and got excited about were rock critics in the 70s and 80s, which was kind of a great era of rock criticism. But just the idea that you could care about something, and you could experience it and find someone else out there. Just the feeling of opening a magazine or a newspaper and you reading, oh, that person heard what I heard, that person saw what I saw, or that person saw something completely different. What's that about? So I was always interested in criticism. I was working as a book critic because my education was in literature, and so that was something that I could do. And I was doing different kinds of freelance stuff, but mostly book reviewing. And I started doing other sort of arts writing. And someone at the New York Times had the really strange idea that I might be a film critic. And I got a call from the culture editor at the Times. This was a long time ago. Asking if I'd be interested in applying for this film critic job that was open. And I thought, well, I've never written a movie review, but I'll try, what am I going to say? And then, one thing led to another, and to my great kind of terror, I was suddenly a film critic at the New York Times. And now it's sort of too late for them to take it back because it's been almost 20 years. So I guess I've learned how to be one. But the answer is, and I think this is true of a lot of people's careers in writing and in journalism, is that you kind of there's a lot of zigzags and a lot of surprises, and a lot of things that you didn't necessarily plan. It was always my dream to be able to make a living by writing, and by writing probably and by writing criticism, ideally of some kind. I wasn't sure what kind, but for a long time that seemed like about the craziest idea that I could have, and the fact that it has worked out is still kind of astonishing to me.
Well, speaking of trajectory of careers and zigzagging, and I guess this is a good way to end it, and we've gone over, which is always good because it means people are very interested. You your role as a critic has changed given the digital era.
Yeah.
What do you think has changed the most given the influence you have as a critic?
I think what's changed the most, I think in a way that the basic job is always the same. I mean, you need to have something to say, and you need to say it as well and as persuasively and as interestingly as you can. I mean, I feel like the basic job of writing is still the same. The formats change, the language can change a little bit, but it's basically, I'm still getting up in the morning and trying to put my thoughts down in words. What has changed a lot, even in the time I've been doing it, is the relationship I have with my readers, who are a lot closer to me, who are a lot more available to me, who I feel like I'm in much more of an actual conversation with than before. And sometimes that can be a little disconcerting, when you write something and the comments fill up with people arguing with you, or your Twitter feed fills up. But I actually have to say, you know, given the basic loneliness of writing, to know that people are out there reading and responding to what I have to say is a great gift and a great source of satisfaction for me. That it's not just a matter of like a few you know, handwritten angry letters that arrive
Right.
3 weeks later about a movie that I don't even remember writing about it, and sometimes come to the wrong person. You know, sometimes
Does that
someone will
make
be.
it easier to cushion kind of, because I'm sure you must go into defensive mode sometimes when people, because you've got a lot of people, everybody thinks they're a critic. Everybody thinks it's so easy to like craft a, you know, an
Yeah.
essay that, um, yeah, does the immediacy of it now like just raise anxiety or?
Not so. I think at first it did. I mean, I think you know, the first time you're out in social media, or you go into the comments and you think like, why are these people so mean? You know, why do they care so much? Why are they so mad? But after a while, I think it you know, you can tune out the most obnoxious, most
Mhm.
hostile, most abusive parts of it, and I think, I mean, I have a job that means that means that I'm talking about things that a lot of people are interested in, and that's really cool. You know, there's a movie that comes out, and there are you know,
Mhm.
hundreds or thousands or more people who are interested in finding out about this movie, and who I can talk to about it. So, you know, it's a great thing to have a job that people are interested in.
Right. And well, Anthony, we can't thank you enough for agreeing for both the print and online interview. I think one of the nice things about the digital era is that it has made, you know, people like yourself more accessible to, you know, the smaller people like ourselves. So we are really grateful, and this has been, our readers can't say enough, you know, great things. They're like, we could listen to him all day, and this was great. So thank you so much, and
Oh, well, it has been my pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
keep writing because we'll keep reading it.
Okay, thank you.
Bye bye. Thank
Uh,
you.
Take care.